So this was a chart that we looked at a little bit last time. Whoops. From the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we're applying economics to healthcare. And I think one of the most important things that I want to impress upon you is the simple fact that healthcare is not economically different or special in a qualitative way from any other area of economics. Why I say that is because people can understand the basic laws and principles of economics, scarcity, supply and demand, how subjective value, how wanting these things and who wants them and how much there is available at any given time, other things being equal, affects the prices. So if you restrict supply or demand or whatever the case may be, you're going to see an impact that comes from this. And so we saw that with water. You're seeing it now in places like Texas with power. Okay, there's nothing magical about power. It's a restriction of supply and the prices remaining the same and demand remaining the same, you're going to run into shortages. And that's what you're seeing right now. You've seen it in California with power before. We've seen it with gas. But on the other hand, when you restrict supply and demand remains the same, prices increase. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think a lot of times people can acknowledge the laws of economics and how people behave and how this all kind of works, at least the basics that we've talked about. They can acknowledge them to a certain level. But then when it comes to certain things that they feel understandably, personally about, healthcare, childcare, medical care, education, those type of things, that when it comes to those things that really, that they feel like affect people more, they feel like that there should be a different category of economics, that normal economics does not apply here. And I think that is an inconsistency, which is understandable and most people do it, but it's an inconsistency of not applying economics thoroughly across the board to all areas. And it really does apply to everything. So people at this point want to look at this situation and they want to moralize about it, which there's room for a philosophical, ethical discussion on these things, but that's not what economics kind of explains about these things. So economics, remember, is a value-free science. It describes, it explains, it predicts. It doesn't tell you what should or ought to be happening, meaning it is a non-normative science. It's an empirical science. But people, understandably, they look at healthcare and they say, well, that could be whether people live or die. So, I mean, the normal rules of economics shouldn't apply there. But that's not possible. And it shows an amount of, I think, intellectual growth and maturity in the subject of economics, where you understand that how we feel about it or not, economics and scarcity and supply and demand and trade-offs and opportunity cost and people giving up what they want less in order to what they want more, that all of these things apply to all areas. One really able economist said that there are no such thing as solutions, there are only trade-offs, right? Everybody kind of tends to want a solution where things can be solved, and things can be solved in the sense of we can make great advances toward things and fix things quite a bit, or considerably get something that's a lot better compared to what we had before. But the truth is, there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs, that we live in a world of trade-offs. And that causes us to make decisions. Now, when it comes to these areas, we've got to look at, okay, why do college tuition and textbooks and childcare and medical care seem to shoot up in their prices, but other things kind of remained kind of the same or have even gotten cheaper, right? And a lot of times, like even the title of this article that we talked about last week, why are flat screen TVs affordable, but basic healthcare is not? Now, the problem, I think, with that article title is a lot of times people think that just by raising the question, you've made an argument. The article is simply asking truly the economic question. The problem right now is that people think that simply by raising a question with moral outrage is an argument, is argumentation. If I tweeted that on Twitter, I don't have a Twitter, but if I tweeted that on Twitter, why is it that flat screen TVs are affordable and going down in price and basic healthcare is not? I'd get all kinds of likes. People would be applauding me just for being outraged at the situation, and just these type of, what does it say about our society that, fill in the blank. In my opinion, this is my opinion right now, it's not economics, but in my opinion, I think that's kind of part of the problem, is that people think that that is an argument, when in fact that doesn't answer the question. It just implies things shouldn't be that way. But the question in the article really is asking this, and people recognize, okay, there's a mismatch between these things, that some stuff seems to go up in quality. Think of TVs from 30 years ago versus TVs from now. TVs from 30 years ago and TVs compared to TVs now were bigger, heavier, did less, and were more expensive. And now TVs do more, are lighter, are usually flat screen TVs have become pretty normalized, and they're cheaper. I have an ad, Best Buy ad from 1996, that shows a laptop computer. You can imagine the limited capacity of a laptop computer from 1996 is Best Buy ad. But this was the newest computer at the time, $3,000. Okay. Cell phones in the 1980s, rich guys had them. These business people would have these cell phones that were this brick cell phone. It could make calls, but today, smartphones, cell phones, iPhones have become somewhat normalized, and you don't look at somebody who has an iPhone and say, wow, that guy is really rich. So why do the factors that apply to TVs not apply to medical care, childcare, and college? What's going on there that causes this mismatch where we see advances in medical technology and stuff like that. Thankfully, it's still advancing, but why has it gotten so much more expensive? Well, it's because, for a couple reasons, TVs, toys, software, wireless service, clothing, housing, furnishings, these things are in competitive markets. These things are in non-competitive markets. Now, I don't mean totally non-competitive, but let's say that these markets, competition is severely limited. And when you limit the supply, the possible supply, when you restrict the supply and the demand for these things remains the same or increases, you will see an increase in prices. And so that's what we've seen. There's nothing magical about it. There's nothing that makes these areas unique economically. It's that there's a restriction of supply and demand remains the same or even increases. That's what happened with college. Federally insured student loan program basically said, allowed loan making institutions and banks to make all kinds of more loans to get people to college, giving people loans that normally wouldn't be getting loans, to 17 and 18-year-olds in a lot of cases, taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt. And then colleges are in a fairly non-competitive market. There are a lot of colleges, but not everybody can start a college. So there's a lot of restrictions in that education market. At the same time, federally insured student loans basically told banks and loan making institutions that with this program, that if the students who took out the loans paid back the loans, the banks would get to keep the money. If the students did not pay back the loans, the government would cover it, which means that we as the American taxpayers would cover the loans, which encouraged these banks to make loans to people and to situations that they would not otherwise make them. And so that flooded the education market with way more people going to school and taking on debt to go to school. And the amount of colleges stayed about the same. So when you have more people wanting something, that's demand, and the supply remains the same, you see an increase in prices. Now, that's not the only thing going on with this. Along with this whole system, they had to hire a bunch more people to administrate and facilitate the system, and all those people had to be paid as well. So the costs continue to rise. Same thing with medical care. Medical care is a very restrictive industry. It's almost what we might call, I'm not going to call it monopolistic, but it's where a very few companies are given special government privileges to operate in that area. So they act as a sort of, we'll say moving toward a monopoly, which a monopoly is not one company does something really well and a lot of people use it. It's that one company has the legal government sanction to create and sell in a market. And that's basically what's happened with healthcare, is that there's been restrictive competition within healthcare. And the restricted competition, while it's allowed some progress still in quality of care and innovations and things that get discovered, it's overwhelmed the system with demand. The supply has remained the same, and the prices have gone up and increased. The difference with TVs is if somebody saw that, okay, in the 1980s or cell phones or anything else, what a TV was selling for, other companies got into the TV market. Other companies got into the cell phone market. Other companies got into the clothing market. And they started making things. And basically what they realized was they could make money by serving people really well. And if they could offer something different, either better quality or cheaper price or both, that they could get more customers buying their stuff. Now, this put downward pressure on the price, but upward pressure on the quality. The reason why we don't see those things in medical care, childcare, housing, and college is because just the opposite factors are at play. The market is restricted. It's a non-competitive marketplace. And therefore, we see probably a stagnation of quality and an increase in prices. So there's nothing magical about this. It's just what happens when you restrict supply. Demand remains the same or increases. You will see increased prices. Exhibit A, the EpiPen. This is the patent for the EpiPen. The EpiPen's an amazing thing, potentially life-saving device for somebody who goes into shock because of a severe allergic reaction. And you guys have to remind me next time to tell you the story of in a training where I actually accidentally got stabbed by an EpiPen and had to go to the hospital. I was fine, but had to go to the urgent care to get checked out. But anyway, EpiPen is a pretty amazing thing. Now it injects a little bit, just the right dosage of epinephrine, which is difficult to say, into a person's leg that allows them to continue to breathe. You have a second injector in case they go into shock again. Now, EpiPen's unique because what it does is it clicks out the needle, does the dosage, and then it retracts the needle back inside so it doesn't poke anybody. This is an amazing thing. Now, these people, the inventors, we should be very thankful that they put that together. You know, these people took their time, energy, brains, resources to make something that is not something I could probably make. But humans are pretty amazing. You know, in working together in this specialized area, they figured this out. And, you know, I don't have any problem with these people getting filthy rich off of this. That being said, what happened next? Well, you would think in a competitive market, you would see kind of knockoff versions of EpiPen and would kind of flood the market. You'd see a decrease in price, an upward increase in quality, and you'd see more innovation in that area. However, this company called Mylan, who's responsible for EpiPen, who's in charge of EpiPen, went to the US federal government and got this patent. This patent says legally only this one company, Mylan, can make and sell EpiPens. So now what this means is if anyone tries to make something that the US government sees as being too similar, or Mylan sees as being too similar, then they can basically sue, not allow them to do it. If they continue, put them in jail, fine them, send them a cease and desist, all these things. Now, this creates a tension that I think we would have to talk about philosophically some other time. We agree that the inventors of these things should get the credit for this amazing life-saving device, and they should reap the benefits of it. I think most people are agree. And, that if somebody took this and said it was their invention and it wasn't, and they lied about it, we were against plagiarism and all the sorts of those things. On the other hand, should this one company be able to basically have work hand in hand with the US government, the US federal government, to have the federal government enforce that no one else can ever make something similar to this? Because the stuff that goes into EpiPen, the actual medicine, is not that expensive. It's only a couple cents. What makes it unique is the injection system and the retraction system. But there have been times where, and this is the actual patent in PDF form, but there have been times where people tried to make kind of a knockoff version of EpiPen. And the FDA, which is an agency of the US federal government, which is the Food and Drug Administration, went after this company, Teva's EpiPen copy. And the company Mylan is the one that makes EpiPen. So basically, in order to make a new drug, medicine, medical innovation, medical technology, any person or company would have to go through millions of, not only just the research and development, but millions of dollars and years of time to go through the system of being approved by the FDA. Now, to be fair, they say that this is for health and safety standards, but what the FDA effectively does economically is restricts the supply in the market so that Mylan is the only company that can do this. Now, Mylan was at one point able to go from charging $100 for EpiPen to charging, I believe, $600 for EpiPen, 600% increase. Now, a lot of people look at that and they say that, well, the explanation of that is greed. But I think greed can only work as a partial explanation, because greed does not always explain. Greed does not necessarily mean that I can charge whatever I want for anything and that people have to pay it. So greed may be at work there, but it doesn't fully justify the situation of being able to increase prices 600%. Because if I tried to charge $20 for a pencil, most people wouldn't buy it, even if they wanted a pencil. But the difference is with the pencil is the pencil you have alternatives. Pencils are in competitive markets, and I'm not the exclusive seller of pencils, unlike EpiPen. So EpiPen has on its side, Mylan has on its side for EpiPen, the patent, which restricts anyone being able to legally make or sell it, which is a restriction of supply, which means they can charge higher prices. And they also have the FDA as their basically enforcer, and also create so many regulations in this area that it takes millions of dollars of money and years of time to go through any of these things through the legal channels. And so that creates what are called barriers to entry, meaning sometimes people think that businesses are against government regulation, and in many cases they are. But a lot of times, big companies like Mylon invite government regulation and work hand in hand with government regulation because it's a mutually beneficial situation between the two. Mylon invites government regulation because while they can pay the millions of dollars and years of time to deal with all that, it restricts competition, which means more money for them. And when you have a restricted supply and restricted competition and demand remains the same, what you're going to see are increased prices.